Hello, healthy people, and welcome back to Organelle. Today, red blood cell count. This is our first biomarker breakdown. Through it, we're going to explore the nature of this biomarker, the role it plays in our bodies, and of course, how we can improve it. As always, I'm Xavier Greenhound, and joining me is none other than the Organelle digital health platform's founding practitioner, Lionel Godwin. So, without further ado, let's all take the next step on our health journeys. Lionel, my friend, welcome to the first of a new series. We're starting something on Organelle called Biomarker Breakdown, where we're going to
Ah,
go through all of the different lovely biomarkers that the Organelle platform measures, talk about what they are, how they work, and what we can do about them. So, in honor of its predominant position inside of our blood and being a metric that most people have at least heard of, we're going to start off with red blood cells. So, Lionel, could you give us a basic top-level definition of what is red blood cell count and why does it matter?
the red blood cell count is the number of red blood cells present in a given volume of blood within our body. Um, it's measured as part of a complete blood count, and it's typically reported as the number of cells per microliter or liter of blood in our of our red blood cells. Now, red blood cells, for those of us who aren't aware, carry oxygen from the lungs to various tissues and organs throughout the body, and they play a crucial role in not only oxygenation but also the transport of carbon dioxide. The red blood cell count assesses individual oxygen carrying capacities within our blood and provide valuable information around the various conditions um, such as anemia, polycythemia, and certain other chronic diseases that we can suffer from.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome top-level definition. Now let's talk about why the red blood cell actually matters in terms of our overall health. In the Organelle platform, we primarily link red blood cell count as a metric of measuring lung health. Why is that?
Well, understand the role of our lungs in the body. Lungs are linked to our health because our red blood cells carry oxygen uh, from the lungs to all of the body's tissues. So that's obviously the most important aspect of it. If there's a deficiency in red blood cells, such as anemia, which most people would be very aware of, the oxygen carrying capacity of those red blood cells is severely reduced, potentially leading to insufficient oxygenation of our tissues, and then that then really compromises our lung health directly because the oxygen exchange um, impacts on our red cell count.
Okay, tell us a little bit more about that. What's the oxygen
Well,
exchange
so
in our body?
if we look at our red blood cells, I mean they play a crucial role in all of the body's broader ecosystem, if you like. They transport oxygen from the lungs to the body tissues and the organs, ensuring proper oxygenation, and they also aid in the removal of carbon dioxide, which is really significant because if we don't remove that carbon dioxide from our bloodstreams, then obviously all that oxygen is displaced and life cannot be sustained.
Right, so oxygen, super important for life. It's like the energy system. Red blood cells carry that all the way around the body and make sure it gets to all our organs, which means they have energy, they can function. Right, I'm with you. They're tied to the lungs because the lungs is how we get oxygen in, so that's how the main tether. Is there such a thing as too many red blood cells? Can we just keep as many as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, uh, I referenced polycythemia earlier. That's when we've got an overabundance of red blood cells, and you know that this overproduction of red cells can be caused by dehydration. It can be caused by lung disease, for instance, and all of a sudden we've started to deal with some of these chronic illnesses. There are certain genetic conditions that are more prevalent when we've got too many red blood cells. Um, and, you know, people who live in higher altitudes, for instance, generally can have a higher red blood cell count. Um, there's people who use, and you see it a lot in gyms, people who use a lot of performance enhancing drugs and stuff can have excess red blood cells. Now, um, there are so many things that we need to do to make sure that if we do have an overabundance of red blood cells, that we're doing something about them. Um, you know, uh, blood removal is one of the things that we look at. There are medications that we can put people on to try and really deal with this, and there are other therapies that we would always get people to go to their healthcare professional before we started looking at any treatments and/or concerns around having excess red blood cells.
Right. What's the other end of the spectrum look like? You can have too few red blood cells, I take it?
Yes, that's where iron deficiency is probably the most common one that people are familiar with when we've got a really low red blood cells. Bleeding disorders are another consequence, a potential consequence of low red blood cells. Bone marrow disorders, kidney disease, or even significantly nutritional deficiencies can really create a low red blood cell count.
Right. So these red blood cells can't have them too high, can't have them too low. What should they be rough? Let's take, for example, I don't know, a middle-aged male. What should his red blood cell count be?
His red blood cell count really should be between 4.5 and 6.5 is the ratio that we use in Australia. So that's that cells per cubic milliliter that they measure, and it's a really actually we'll talk about that measurement if you like. It's when they measure our red blood cells, they use a what's known as a automated machines in laboratories, and these machines utilize hematology, what they're called hematology analyzers, and they use optical sensors and or impedance technology to measure and count the size of our red blood cells.
Okay, I see. So someone gets a blood test drawn, it goes to the lab, we put it through this impedance machine, and we use that to get red blood cell count per cubic milliliter. That then gets sent to a platform, maybe like ours, that'll automatically analyze it, see if it's between that 4.5 and 6.5 range, and give you a score accordingly. And then if you're too low, give you the advice for fixing too low. If you're too high, giving you the advice for fixing too high. Simple enough process. What are the actual like carry-on effects in your life of red blood cells? Let's not talk diseases. Let's talk more general things. Is it gonna like if you're too low, is that gonna ruin your energy levels? Is too high gonna make you like hyper energetic?
Too low definitely affects you, mate. Definitely, people will be lethargic because again that low iron and that lack of oxygenated blood. You know, if our red blood cells are too low, clearly we're not getting enough oxygen passing around our body. So that can cause mental impairment, certainly a lack of concentration, fatigue, a loss of energy, and in some cases, for some people that can lead to some anxiety and stress as well because they feel really lethargic. They have no idea why. If they haven't had their bloods tested and they're not familiar with it, then believe me, there are a lot of people that suffer anemia or low iron in Australia that goes unidentified because people don't generally get their biomarkers done often enough. So they just feel that way and think it's a normal way of feeling when the reality is it's not. We should never uh, feel lethargic as such, particularly if you have, good nutrition and we're exercising regularly and, we're really conscious of how we live our lifestyle. So, there can be real detrimental side effects to it. Conversely, with higher cell count, there is just the reality is that there could be, some chronic disease or illness happening within the body that we should identify and become very aware of so that we can provide that early intervention and or treatment.
Right. So let's talk intervention then. Probably not towards the extreme side of it's a chronic illness and we have to go through the direct medical system. But what can we do in terms of nutrition, in terms of behaviors, to try and help combat either too high or too low red blood cell counts?
So one is to get an understanding clearly. So establish where your red blood cells are, and then it comes down to having created that awareness, then looking at a good, balanced, nutrient-rich diet. And particularly with red blood cells, we want to make sure that we're getting good iron-rich food, good fortified cereals, for instance, eggs, and balancing out our diet. We want to make sure that we're getting really good folate as part of our diet as well. That our vitamin B12 levels are really, really good. That as I said, our iron-rich food consumption is consistent with our needs. And it's more, it's vitally important that we understand what those needs are by understanding what our red blood cell count is, and then addressing that through our nutritional practices.
Awesome. I think that's a pretty comprehensive guide to red blood cells, or red blood cell counts, rather. Thank you for that, Lionel.
But just always remember, if you have any concerns, around your red blood cells, it's to get a blood test and consult your healthcare professional. It's something that you shouldn't play around with. You don't rely on Dr. Google or anything like that. Actually talk to your healthcare professional and understand, because there can be real dangers with low or high red blood cells, and we should be very familiar with just where we're at and what we could do from a management perspective.
One's like, I've ruined my own ending here, but I'll throw it in for good measure because I forgot to say it. How do red blood cell counts change over time as we age?
Obviously, as our energy levels diminish, or our activities diminish, that can change our red blood cells count. Stress, anxiety plays a big part. Being overweight, eating poor diets, smoking too much, excess alcohol consumption. All of these can impact on our red blood cell count. Obviously, our damage to our liver can make a significant impact on that as well. So it's about trying to maintain this really good foundation of health and wellness is vitally important. The better and more balanced we are overall, the less likelihood there is of there being issues around our red blood cell counts.
Roger that. That seems like a better place to end it. Thank you so much for your time, Lionel.
Good on you, Xavier. Take care, buddy.